There he is for the folks watching on YouTube or markimmelman.com. He's Ward Jarvis. And Ward, I've been so hard to get to, but I've been looking forward to this conversation because you bring many, many PGA Tour insights and lots of ways our golfers who are fans of this vodcast can improve. So welcome to the show, man. It's nice to have you.
Hey, Mark, it's great to be with you. I'm a big fan of the show. So it's an honor to be able to chat with you.
Of course, man. Okay, let's dive in. We have a global audience. They listen from all parts. They're reaching out on social media, requesting folks. A lot of people have talked about the mental game, which is kind of that's your lane. So I want to get there. But before we do, please put us into context. Tell us a little bit more about you and how you came to where you are.
Sure. I'll try to make it as quick as possible.
All right.
My story reminds me a lot of what Steve Jobs told the graduating class at Stanford in his famous commencement speech. One of the main points he made is about the dots in our life. And, I definitely had some significant dots. And the main point he made was, in real time, looking forward, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to always be able to connect the dots in our life.
Yeah.
But as we look back, sometimes we had the good fortune to be able to connect the dots, and that's a really cool experience. So, the dots in my life, Mark, were, when I started speaking as a 3 and 4 year old, it was very evident that I was one of 70 million people worldwide who stuttered. So stuttering was a part of my identity from the get-go. The other significant dot has always been golf. I grew up in Paducah, Kentucky, around the corner from a PGA Tour pro, PGA Tour winner, Champions Tour winner, Russ Cochran.
Yeah.
And when I started playing golf at age 10, it was the first thing I was ever really remembering being good at. And Russ was always kind of took me under his wing from that point on, and so I was really exposed to the pro game at an early in my life. I went on to when I hit the age around 15, I got the putting yips, and it was real ironic. It happened after literally 2 weeks after my biggest win. Today, I won a statewide high school event, and just really, more or less, took away my competitive days. I went on to piece it back together as much as I could. Went on to walk on my my college team at Stanford University and played a year, but competitively I was toast, just to be honest. Okay. So I went on to study religion at the master's level. Got out and kind of had a realization.
That'll help you. That'll help you with the yips and the stuttering a little bit now.
Well, it was definitely a dot. I went on, and I came to the realization that once I got out, hey, I don't really want to be sitting around arguing with other religious scholars the rest of my life.
All right.
So it was one of those dots in real time. Like, why did I do that? But I went on. Like I said, I always loved the pro game. So I found myself single, footloose, fancy free, no kids, had some friends on tour. And I said, why don't I go out and caddy? And then this is around 2009, 2010. I did that on what was in the Nationwide Tour, now the Korn Ferry Tour. Got to meet a lot of guys that I see every week out on tour now.
Yeah.
Your Scott Stallings, your Josh Teeters, your Ricky Fowlers, Keegan Bradleys, all those guys.
You're listing a bunch of the good guys over there. Apparently, you hang out with the nice guys.
So 2 years in, I meet my wife to be, and I kind of come to another realization that if we're gonna have the family I want to have, and the life I really want to have, caddying on the Korn Ferry Tour is probably not going to be the route to take, for me at least. And so I ended up moving back to my hometown of Paducah, became a firefighter, and
Ward.
Yeah. And so,
You just,
like I said,
you just, you've
it's
just
got
been
a
in
lot of
service.
dots, Mark. But
Yeah,
you
you've been,
know,
but wait a second, you've been in service your entire life. And now with the job you're in, I would say that's probably firefighter, caddy, all these things you've done.
it
What you
is.
currently do is probably the biggest
It's
service job there is.
situational across the board.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
so what got me kind of into studying the brain at a deeper level wasn't originally golf, but I'd always remembered that my experience with stuttering and my experience with the yips, they felt almost identical
Okay.
mentally.
All right.
Mentally, they resisted a certain type of effort, a certain type of practice. You couldn't really will your way out of them.
Mm-hmm.
Very frustrating, very chaotic. And so, as a firefighter, golf is very situational, right? Stuttering is extremely situational. Firefighting is, the task of firefighting are very situational.
Yeah.
And as a stutterer, where I found I was having my most difficulties was not the emergency situations. Those were different situations, and my brain oriented to different, to emergency situations better
Mm-hmm.
from a speaking standpoint. But it
Yeah.
was the checking the radios in the morning, just simply saying a phrase. It was calling our truck back into the station, and along this time, I started really diving into the latest neuroscience research on stuttering.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole time I'm diving in, I'm really thinking about golf and making all these connections um, that I thought could really potentially help golfers, deal with a host of issues because the mind is a constant in golf.
It's a
And
battlefield, isn't it?
yeah, and it's one challenge after another. And so it just happened to be the very last event I ever caddied for was for a young pro named Brendon Todd, and this was in February of 2010, and it was one event. And Brendon had just come back to the nationwide tour after having lost his card his rookie year on tour. He
Mm-hmm.
had been All American at Georgia. Um, we spent the week together. Obviously, Brendon was then in what he now calls his first bout with the full swing yips,
Yeah.
the big miss. The miss where there can be 200 yards between your right miss and your left miss, and effectively, didn't do it every time. Again, very situational. And but 2 or 3, 4 shots around were going off the property.
Yeah.
Very tough place to play as a pro golfer. And so I had kept up with his career. This was in 2010, and by 2014, he had already worked himself out of it somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
Got back on tour, won the Byron Nelson in 14, missed out on the Ryder Cup by a spot or two in 2015, and then by happenstance at the end of 2015, he now looking back, he got his second bout with the full swing yet.
All right.
And that unfortunately led to roughly 40 missed cuts in a row. Lost his card. Obviously, was down to about maybe 2 guaranteed events a year on past champion status, and it just happened to be. I thought of Brendon. When I was developing my system around mental performance. And I still had his number, and I said, "This guy's never going to answer my call." Because I had one event for him. But
Yeah.
I just had this gut feeling that my story and these ideas that I was developing, if they were going to connect with anyone, it would be a guy like Brendon Todd.
Yeah.
And Mark, made a phone call asking you shall receive, basically. And I made a phone call, and he answered. And long story short, that was in August of 2018, and Brendon and I have spoken every week since then.
And now you're a fixture on the PGA Tour, highly sought after.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to backtrack a bit before we get into the 3 big topics I want to touch, because you have so much stuff that I feel like golfers of all skill stations can learn from, and anyone watching or listening to this. And folks, I implore you to share this one with your friends, because everyone is battling something, and the mind is a battlefield, whether it's golf or beyond the golf course. I want to back you up a little bit to the stuttering, because you talk about the situational aspect of it, and I know he's a dear friend. He's a young star on the PGA Tour, up and coming, Christian Besaidnote, who
He's
really struggled.
a good friend of mine.
Yeah. Okay. So now I think there's something to be learned for everyone here, whether we all stutter or not. But it's that situation that we put in, and then you're trying to formulate this thing or make your golf swing or whatever the case might be, and it's just not coming out the way that it should. Just talk a little bit to that and your personal struggle and how you beat that.
Absolutely. Well, my biggest takeaway from my research into stuttering was that speaking is movement.
Okay.
Obviously, the brain is coordinating every single movement we make as human beings, which is pretty fascinating in itself, and everything that goes into.
Kidding, no, yeah.
And it's as movement, it's the brain's coordinating it, and the big things that the brain uses to coordinate every movement are memory, number one, and then number two, real-time inputs. And it's a very unintuitive thing when you study it, because when it comes to movement, the brain works predictively rather than reactively, meaning the brain's not just sitting around waiting to be stimulated by our will before it starts coordinating our movements.
Okay. Right.
The illustration I use is, everyone who's driven a car has probably had another car pull out in front of them. And we had that experience of slamming on the brakes before we're even really conscious of
exactly.
All right.
Okay.
And that's an illustration that the brain works through environment and situations and patterns. And so the brain knows when we're driving a car, what can potentially happen when we're driving a car, what potential patterns can be.
Yeah.
And just like when we step into our competitive arena, the brain knows the potentials of that arena. Things can go well, things can go bad. And so, the stuttering being a lot like the yips, it's what I call, it can be defined in a lot of different ways. I kind of define it as the periodic loss of an automatic ability, meaning, Christian and I could be talking to you, and we obviously have an automatic ability to speak.
Yeah.
But for one reason or another, we lose that automatic ability depending on certain situations and environments, and a lot's based on our memory. So a lot of the work I do with pros is helping them deal with those two inputs. The memory piece, filtering through memories. In psychological terms, it could be called reframing. I call it kind of neutralizing potential negative experiences.
All right.
And then the other piece are those real-time inputs. For the golfer, that's going to be pre-shot routine type stuff, our processes that we're going through. And we're always having to navigate the unseen, aren't we, Mark, as golfers, as competitors? And the tie between stuttering, we use the analogy of the iceberg. Everyone sees the tip of the iceberg, and for the stutter, that's the behavioral aspect.
Yeah.
Right. For the big misser, that's the big miss. Right. Those are the visual things that the observers are seeing. Right. But there's all the unseen.
Yeah.
And as a coach, I like to label the unseen and organize the unseen.
Well, okay. Well, you're a pro. This is the perfect segue. Well, let's work to it. Let's make this golf now, because you've tied this knot so beautifully for me, and I see how it works. And I've had Mike Grevelos on the show a couple times. He's done so much like yourself, research on the brain and mind and stuff. And I'm seeing the connection. So I want to kick you off with this. And this is Big Miss Yips, the whole thing. They're all born in the same place, really? Yeah, because you say it's the periodic loss of automatic ability. And for the folks watching on YouTube, you'll see me write. I'm writing nonstop. I've filled up an entire legal pad already here. Because we can go on the range all day long and just fire away balls, right? Or go on the green and make 5-footers. And then all of a sudden, God bless him, Lucas Glover's a dear friend. And this guy hits it like he's fallen straight out of heaven. but you put him over 10 foot on the greens and he's fine. Put him on 2 feet and it's a different animal. So let's start there because it's the environment. And I want to start with, okay, I know I'm struggling with this. It's now we're delving under the tip of the iceberg. A lot of folks will just want to go, screw it, I don't want to deal with it. And they don't want to deal with the adversity of it all.
Yeah.
But it takes a mindset in itself to go, all right, I'm up for this challenge. I know I've seen myself, I've felt myself, all the stuff falling short. I spoke with a guy yesterday, I had the chipping yips. For goodness sake, I hadn't played for a while and I started to find I mishit one or two. And all of a sudden, now that I'm getting back into golf, I've got a bit more time. I'm over the ball and I'm like, oh, Lordy, please, don't skin this one over the back of the green. And all of a sudden, a motion that for me was probably my signature when I was playing golf almost feels like it's impossible. So let's start with the welcoming of the adversity of it all and what you would say there.
Absolutely. The experience of it really does put you kind of in an avoidance kind of retreat mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the, really with the yips, you have two good elements of human nature in and of themselves kind of conflicting. The brain has the ability to automate things. When we learn how to ride a bike, we pretty much know how to ride a bike the rest of our life.
Yeah.
When we learn how to speak, we pretty much know how to speak the rest of our life. And at the level of golfers we're working with, that it does become somewhat automatic. Close to riding a bike. Not a perfect analogy, right?
That's right.
But and then secondly, but the brain also has the ability to project out and predict pain and future pain. And so it's got those two good things in itself. It's a good ability to be able to predict future and know patterns and be able to avoid bad things, right? So when with the yips, those things are colliding.
Yeah.
So stepping back and realizing that in and of themselves, they're good things. They're good human capacity.
Crazy.
And so, and like in Christian's case, his was a little different than mine, but we're still stutterers to this day. He had an incident where he ingested something as a kid that changed his brain chemistry, which led to stuttering. Mine was kind of from the get-go, but we're both our brains were put in an environment and changed, and that's what we have to deal with, And so it's very situational. And a lot of these guys we're working with as coaches, Mark, as you well know, a lot of them have been very good from the get-go. They've never really struggled before, and a lot of them, golf is this tricky mixture, right, between conscious activity and unconscious activity. It's in one thing, like I hear it time and time again when I'm watching golf. Well, I just wish Lucas could be more reactive. I just wish he could sit up there. Well, that's the whole problem. That's the whole problem. Like not being when the brain like freezes up. One of the it's fight, it's flight, or it's freeze. Sometimes if a bear's there, we freeze. And a lot of times with stuttering, we call it blocking, and that's like it can be like a bouncing movement, and it can be like a blockage of movement. So like nothing comes out at all. And so golf is more like, I compare it to, you ever seen those cooking shows with the professional chefs, and they get all, they're competing against each other, and it's,
and you get some guy shouting at someone else.
Time related pressure. If we had all the time in the world, then we could really just not hit a shot until we're ready. But you can't do that in golf. You can't do that in golf without it getting really weird. And what I tell people is that, you get yourself like a discomfort scale, 1 to 10. And when you start responding to the plan of your shot, I call that the playing moment, the totality of the playing moment. If you start at, say, an 8 discomfort level, it's very unrealistic to think that you're going to get to 0 before the appropriate time to pull the trigger, right?
Okay.
you can't back off 1,000 times. So I say, the brain doesn't really even expect you to get to zero. But if you can have things in your process, whether it's thoughts, voluntary movements, moving your attention in certain ways, that get that brain going maybe from an 8 to a 6. Just be tipping the scales in the
Your
right direction.
functional level. All right.
That's really, the brain is just like, I call it kind of locking into the automatics. Brendan and I have a phrase, we say there's no fear in automatics.
Okay.
There's no fear in automatics. And, a lot of my job kind of revolves around the difference between, a lot of people equate confidence with self-belief or self-trust. And I don't. I think confidence is, we're confident when we know our skills match our challenges, right? And so the tricky thing with golf, we're not just playing one position. So there are a multitude of challenges. And I have this theory that even the greatest golfer in the world are not equally confident across the board.
That's true.
If you think about all the skills, all the competencies going into golf, the physical, the mental, the body aspects, no one is going to be equally confident in every area. And confidence is on a scale, right? A scale always. Self-belief and it can be called self-efficacy, is more our ability to manage those differing degrees of confidence. And
True.
so if I can get a player to believe in their ability, not that they're going to be perfectly matched to every challenge they faced, but if we can be building up their best and get them to believe in their ability to manage those differing degrees of confidence, then they're going to be primed to go into their box, as I call it, their competitive domain, those goal-oriented spaces of our life, and connect under pressure with their best. But, we always, as human beings and as golfers, we don't just have a relationship with our best, right? We always have a relationship with our worst, right?
Oh, boy.
With Brendan, one of the big things was redeveloping that relationship with his worst, because he unfortunately experienced it,
Mm-hmm.
But everyone carries that around. And I try to tie that kind of into every player's performance identity. It's two relationships. We're trying to build up our best, and we're trying to peacefully coexist with our worst, as I call it. And our processes are about connecting with our best under pressure.
All right. I'm writing too much. Connecting with best and worst. And you call it performance identity. I love that term there. I need to back you up just a second here, because I want to be here a little while longer. Well, you said confidence, and I heard you, and I'm now listening to you as a fan and a learner. I'm not an interviewer, okay? You talked about confidence is knowing when your skills match the challenges. Did I get that right? Or was there something else to that?
Exactly.
Okay. To me, I feel like this is almost the holy grail for everyone watching this, whether it's the big miss off the tee, or whether it's like, oh my goodness, it's that shot out of the rough over a bunker, where my discomfort level is high and my confidence in this is low, and I'm trying to get to a functional level. Help us a little bit more. You talk about the performance boxes and where you're functional. Let's go there a little bit more, because I feel like, knowing you might not have the skill to deal with a challenge, you can still get by it and survive to a certain extent. Am I saying that right?
Everyone can identify their challenges and learn how to practice around them.
Okay.
And this is huge. I worked with another former major champion for over a year, and the issue was chipping. And he had always been a good chipper. It doesn't mean he always had the best technique on tour, but he had great hands and always stayed out of his way mentally, therefore led to a lot of great chipping. Well, one thing led to another, and he missed a short chip on number one at Riviera, par 5. Right. The par 5 chip, 10 yards in front of the green to a front pin, and we skull it over. The next day we chunked it. And it was a bad experience, right? And so my question was, okay, now we've had struggle introduced maybe for the first time. How do you practice this scenario? And he was a major champion, and I'm not coming down on him, because I think this applies to all golfers. He could not answer how he practiced that. And so I said, part of our goal in our time
avoidance, surely avoidance becomes a thing too, and this is coming from a recovering golf instructor who now has turned to a microphone, which is a lot easier. And I say this to all of our fans on this podcast often. I'm like, I've got some of the world's best instructors on here. I've taught major champions and worked with them as you have. And for me, my bent is to ascribe a physical adjustment or modification to everything. I feel like that's intellectually lazy because we are so holistic and everything works from the mind. And so the professional goes to avoidance, or they go to, well, I got to technique this out of it. And then they start to become robotic in everything they do.
Exactly. And, I think a big misconception about mental coaching, and it's not just neck up. We're not just teaching people to think better.
Huh?
It's always a combination of, if I'm always, doing things that involve hitting golf balls,
You're right.
with my players. If you work with baseball pitchers, you're going to have to throw. You can't just sit around and work on your attitude. Attitude alone is not going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously a component, and mindset is a component, just as the physical side is a component,
Yeah.
a major one, right? And so, so we kind of we created a new practice scenario. We called it the par 5 chip. So he
This
didn't.
is the future of practice you wanted to address, right?
Yeah, and so he didn't chip at the chipping green anymore. He chipped right along the putting green, and what we called it short chipping, meaning we're going to get good at. We put a water bottle out in front of the ball, and we're going to put a tee maybe 10 to 15 feet in front of that water bottle, and
Mm-hmm.
the tee is where we want the ball to end up.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
not land. So we really built his confidence. We practiced his process around that scenario, and then all of a sudden he found like, hey, I can move back all day, because moving back is just the physical side. It's just adding speed.
Exactly.
And and
That's interesting you say that,
a bigger
because
crowd too around the putting green. Mark.
oh yeah, well that adds a different that's a
And
different dimension entirely, isn't
that's
it?
kind of the scenario.
Yeah.
Did you hear Daniel Kang earlier last year say that she got basically chipping yips, and so she was missing greens on purpose in certain events to work on it?
No, well, I was aware of it. I didn't know she'd said that.
Yeah, she'd actually said that, and some of her pro buddies were like saying that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But that was her way of working through it.
Well, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And
Absolutely.
I guess along those lines, I had an individual yesterday who, when it was full speed, and these were short shots, someone can have the drive. I've talked to Stenson. He's had the driver yips, man. He couldn't find the golf course with one. And he got around that by going to a 3-wood. And thankfully he had the power enough to do that, but not many folks do. Not a Brendon Todd, for argument's sake. You have to hit the driver. And with this individual, moving at faster speed greenside was okay, but it was that stuff where you had to reduce the speed, and then something just flinches, and all of a sudden it's disastrous, and then it becomes this whirlpool.
Well, in terms of like collaborative efforts between my side of the mental practice side of things, definitely consider myself a practice coach. I think of the story of last year of the Braves pitcher Tyler Matzik. It probably, in my mind, is one of the, obviously it's kind of in my space, but Tyler had the pitching yips 2 years before last year's stellar performance in the World Series, where he literally could not, he was spiking the ball 20 feet in front of the plate, or hitting batter after batter, or throwing it literally over the back screen.
Okay.
And he got with a guy named Jason Kuhn, who's close to me here in Kentucky. And Jason was a retired Navy SEAL who had actually got the pitching yips, went through Hell Week, made it through Hell Week, and came to this realization that stuttering, not stuttering, but the yips really isn't a mental toughness issue, and he developed his system of throwing. But what he did with Tyler was really, like, again, in psychological circles, it's called exposure therapy. They worked on his mechanics to a point, but when the mechanics were where they wanted them to be, they took him out to a field in Middle Tennessee, far away from the Atlanta Braves, and Jason hired bystanders, friends to come in, lay down at 20 feet in front of the home plate, for people to walk around the mound, basically with a list of all of Tyler's failures, embarrassments,
And they're saying this to
horror
him.
moments, uh, the video screens of past Yips playing, and that's the environment. That is kind of what I call a full immersion environment.
No
For the
kidding.
golfers, it's not. I've only had a few guys that I think could benefit from a full immersion program, but it's really an interesting space to explore, especially for the future of dealing with the big miss.
Mm.
I think it has to be both. And we can get these big missers who go on Instagram with a new instructor and pure shot after shot after shot, but as soon as they step into their box or their competitive arena and they shoot 85, it's not really doing us any good to see them hit pure shot after pure shot. So something has to happen to induce
Yeah. Okay.
it,
Mm.
outside the competitive arena.
Well, this is fantastic. Because I want to empower everyone watching and listening to this now to go and help themselves, because you've brought the wisdom and the knowledge, and you've helped us to understand the concept here. And you've also, I think, put the light at the end of the tunnel for everyone listening to this, because it might not be the yips, but everyone has that shot on the golf course or has that life situation that they dread.
Mm-hmm.
And the inevitability or the truth of it all is that this thing's going to show up likely when you least want it to, and then you have to deal with it. So you speak of the future of practice. Now, full immersion, that's heavy. But for people listening to this who might have, let's start with the 3-footer, that putt that you're supposed to make, the 100%er that you get over there and then you miss one or two and all of a sudden it becomes involuntary. Mm-hmm. Lucas, is it as much of just putting themselves in that situation and just going through it and going through it and going through it and finding a little something to lock into, to direct their attention, and is it grinding that way, or is there another way to practice it?
No, I mean, with when I'm there's not a foolproof one size fits all strategy.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of experimenting. Every player's different. Every player experiences these situations a bit differently. So there's a lot of collaboration. They're bringing a lot to the table. I'm bringing a lot to the table, and we're having kind of brainstorming sessions, what I call like putting options on the table.
Gotcha, right.
Options.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that, we develop these practice scenarios. Obviously, I know the practice scenarios that work for my guys and gals, right? Mm-hmm. But I can't just assume, it's going to work the same for every player. So, kind of going back to the automatics, I like to put a lot of automatics, a lot of consciousness, again, going back to just, I don't really believe in just making it totally reactive, because it's starting from scratch. It's not hitting the baseball, it's throwing the baseball, right?
Yeah, gotcha.
And 2 different motor patterns, 2 different brain coordinations. And so I like to add as many automatics. Just think about everything that we do. Like if I tell you, Mark, blink your eyes, you're not going to have any anticipation on being able to blink your eyes.
Yeah.
Mark, tell me your name. Mark, pick up this pencil. And that kind of goes into our self-talk, leading into, okay, how do we want that inner environment to sound? I like it very tactical versus versus like a motivational rah-rah. We're not getting
I can do this. All right. Okay.
Mm-hmm. We're actually coaching ourselves, talking ourselves through our steps. So I like it to be very conscious. Like think consciously of these automatic things, and so, for every player, those things are end up being a little different. But I think your listeners can kind of get a feel for.
Yeah, no, of course. And, with Lucas, for argument's sakes, if folks aren't familiar with him, he went to the arm lock style of putting, and that helped stabilize stuff. And I noticed here recently in Memphis at the 2022 FedEx St. Jude event, which incidentally won by Will Zalatoris, who's got his own battles on the green from short range.
Yeah.
But the thing about Will is when the putting stroke went crooked, he used to react, and that created that flash environment. To me now, it looks like even if it goes crooked, it's not like he panics. He's like, all right, well, it's crooked. I can still square this up enough to get the thing online. So it's almost an acceptance of who he is. And he's making some very meaningful putts. But Lucas, there was the physical of going to the arm lock. And I see too that he doesn't spend much time. Once he's over that thing, he pulls the trigger. Am I right?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I think we like to kind of, obviously from 10 feet, he's statistically good. And his stroke is smooth, right? Unlike, some other great putters, their stroke isn't really smooth.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, we are dealing with a little different situation, when we get kind of in that shorter space. And, yeah, like you said, there is a lot of acceptance involved in that. Okay. Yeah. And there's strategy around that, to tell you a funny story. So the first time I worked with Lucas was at the Players Championship a few years ago. And he had been struggling, missing all his short putts earlier in the year. We met, we talked, we strategized, and so I have a practice game that I call it the par 2 game, which is basically we'll put, in his case, we do it from short ranges. So we'll take a 3-foot putt. We'll do 18 holes. Each hole is par 2.
All right.
Basically, the first putt's a 3-footer. Okay. And if you miss that 3-footer, you got to go to 4 feet. And the 4-footer is your par and beyond attempt. You have to stay there until you hole out. Okay. So if you make the 3-footer, you're 1 under. I go drop another 3-footer, and we hit that and move on. You can actually do this game with every club in the bag too. That's why I like it. And it's a scoring system, and it mimics gaining momentum, losing momentum, having to reset, having to do your process and whatnot. But I will actually walk around my player and talk about negative things. In his case, anyone can go on YouTube and see a putt that he had at Wyndham where he almost missed the putter.
Yeah.
And this is my first time with Lucas. And I said, Lucas, what people don't understand, that putt was for a 60. He had a 12-footer for a 59. So playing good golf. I'm sure he made a handful of putts that day. And he knocked it up there last putt of the day, and it went viral, of course, because he almost missed the putt, But again, just a human capacity to experience that. And so I said, Lucas, have you ever had a putt for a 60?
You're a pig.
and he just stopped. He knew exactly what I was doing. And, but our minds have to go backwards into the negative if we're going to reshape those memories. Because you remember that every time we go into an environment, one of the things the brain's using to coordinate our movements is our memory.
Yeah, exactly.
So my goal is, in that practice scenario, the brain's also storing memories. And if we can I call it problem solving visualization, Mark.
Okay.
And I got a lot of this from Michael Phelps, where I heard him, he said, visualization is huge for me, but people may think that I spend the majority of my time envisioning my perfect race. Or for the golfer, okay, I'm going to birdie the first 3 holes. I'm going to visualize that. Okay. What goes into that? He said, but that's 10% of my visualization. He said 90% of my visualization leading up to races, leading up to competitions, starts in the negative. I'm seeing things go wrong. In one case, he had one scenario where he visualized a goggle malfunction. Okay. And he visualized himself solving the problem.
Oh, all right, cool.
So in our golfer's case, unfortunately, we all have lots in our memory bank that we can go back to where we block that tee shot. So the point is not to suppress that, but to bring it to the surface and then actually use that as your reference point when you're practicing.
So good.
Does that make sense?
So good. Yeah, really. It's so simple, but it's actually so profound.
I brought that up and I say, okay, now let's think of ourselves, what we were feeling, all those bad feelings, and what's our go? Basically go through step 1 of the process that we've been developing.
Beautiful. All right, one more question. I've kept you for a very long time. I think a lot of this, and I'm going back to what you said, I've sort of known this, but now you've galvanized it for me, that stuff is situational. And so for the golfer who's struggling with a big miss off the tee, don't just go through this going, oh, well, I know it's somewhere in the cache of weapons. It happens in an environment. So we've got to be alert to self and start to see, okay, wind out of the left, water down the left, and I'm hitting it to kingdom come down the right-hand side. So do you then advocate that people are aware and then go to that place and go and practice in that environment a little more too, to reshape those memories?
Definitely, and visualize that scenario on the practice range.
Yeah.
Right? Do performance games, scoring games with that visual. Hit an extra ball in a practice round, maybe like that.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of it it is like that, because golf is, we have a lot of uncertainties. Yes, in golf, we have a lot of things that we can never predict with 100% certainty about what our round today will be like. All right, but if you think about it, there are things, I call them the certain moments, and that's the things that we strategize around. Those are the things that don't change. Those are the fundamentals. In our case, I say we know we're going to plan golf shots, and the purpose of a plan is to make the best decision possible. We know we're going to have to execute on every plan. It's not just those who are making the best decisions who we see on TV. It's the people who are executing to one degree or another those intentions. And then we always, after every shot, we're going to have some type of thought or feeling about the outcome. If we're laying up on a par 5 and we pure 8-iron down the middle of the fairway, that thought's barely going to even register as real, right? It's just going to be on to the next. In a lot of our cases in our twisted brains, well, I didn't mess that up, on to the next shot.
Exactly right.
But if we pull that 8-iron in the trees, we're going to have a thought or feeling about the outcome. But now we're going to have to put in some work in shaping that memory and whatnot. But the angle that I oftentimes end up taking is what I call basically the fourth certainty, the fourth moment. And that's what I call, I term it pre-shot feedback. And feedback is a term from the psychology of learning, but I use it as, think about the certain things that the game feeds us every time we play. And one of those things that the game is feeding us, it's thoughts and feelings about potential outcomes. Right? We're in a state of uncertainty. We don't have full knowledge of what the outcome is going to be. And so a lot of times that's the discomfort, that's the anticipation that we're having to manage our focus around.
Yeah.
So, if we can really develop out our relationship with again, that's an unseen real element that every golfer goes through, and
Brilliant stuff.
To one degree or another. And if we can label it, if we can describe it, then we're in a position for that moment. It doesn't have to hurt us. It can actually, at the level that we work a lot in, the intensity can actually make the concentration that much better. So, you got that moment and you develop out your relationship with it, and you realize that, hey, maybe I need a reminder, that I can't want my way to the finish line. I have to execute my way to the finish line. And I know my processes, I practice my processes. And so that's what I call just getting organized, staying organized through what can be at times a very chaotic, competitive environment.
You've shed a light on something that's lurking there in the shadows with just about every golfer. It might not be manifest by the yips or the big miss or, I don't know, sculling iron shots when it means something, but this is there and it's lurking. That's the best term I can use. Ward, you've been great. You've been awesome with your time. I'm sure people are going to have more questions. Is there social media, a website where they can reach out to you, maybe work with you if the chance provides itself?
Absolutely. Well, Mark, first of all, it's been great spending time with you. I've loved
My pleasure.
Chat. Yeah, they can go to wardjarvis.com where all my contact information is there. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at WJarvis Coaching. And so I'm based out of the Country Club Paducah in Paducah, Kentucky. Tell people it's 2 hours from Nashville, 3 hours from St. Louis. So that kind of
easy to get there.
But yeah.
Hey, and I want to say this while I got you on the line before I let you go. Folks who stutter, reach out to us on social media. Let's shine some light on this stuff.
Absolutely.
Let's create a community with us on the Mark Tribe. Hey, you're the best. This has been awesome. I'm sad that it took so long for us to get together, but I'm glad that it happened. So thank you.
Great, Mark. Thanks for having me.